Copyright notice. Favorite mistake. Copyright by Victoria Pinder. This book is a work of fiction. The names, characters, places, and incidents are the product of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual events, business establishments, locales, or persons, living or dead, is entirely coincidental. All rights reserved. No part of this publication may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means, electronic, mechanical, photocopying, recording, or otherwise, without the prior written permission of the copyright owner. Chapter 1. Sandra Marshall took off her white Prada sunglasses and assessed the brand new ship. The cruise ship heading to the Bahamas on a 4-day trip that doubled as her best friend and cousin's wedding facility seemed perfect. If she ever decided to get married, perhaps she should be like her cousin Jay and her best friend Penny, and choose a cruise ship too. Not that she had a boyfriend to worry about this, but her last name, Marshall, often landed her into needless talk. She turned and checked that the bags were being taken care of by the valets. If she lost the bride's wedding dress or any of the outfits, she'd lose their faith. Satisfied, Sandy breezed past the line of passengers to board, headed toward the VIP section, and handed over her passport. At least this trip gave her time to think about the buyout and merger of her name with the House of Morgan clothing line. Not that she wanted to think about work this weekend. The buyout would leave her with too much free time and not much to fill her days with. Goosebumps grew on her arm as she stood waiting for the employee to check her in. A warmness grew inside her. She flipped her hair out of the way and saw that the person next to her at the counter with another employee was Wyatt Colburn. The little girl holding his hand and a small dog must be his daughter Charlotte. Not that she'd ever met his daughter officially. She held her breath and looked in her Versace pocketbook, like she had lost something inside. As her face felt hot, she shoved her sunglasses on to cover her face. Hopefully he didn't see her. Then the employee said, "Here is your passport, Miss Marshall. Please take off your sunglasses and look at the camera." Her skin felt jumpy as she fiddled with her sunglasses. "Fine." "Sandra." The gravel of his voice still thrilled her, even if she didn't want it to. When they were dating, he'd cheated on her and then married the woman. She clutched her glasses tighter and pasted on a huge smile. Wyatt, a little girl with brown curls and brown eyes that matched her father's, tugged on his arm. "Daddy, who's that?" "No one, sweetheart." Her face heated again as she turned and picked up her boarding pass from the counter. Her smile faltered as she said, "Thank you." Her mind repeated what Wyatt said. No one. Right. Their one summer together had made her want to quit college and follow him anywhere. She'd have joined the Marines to be with him, until she went to see him and another woman named Jessica claimed to be his girlfriend. A year later, Wyatt and Jessica married and had a baby. Sandy lost faith in love, though she often heard whispers from Penny that Wyatt wasn't happy. Then she'd heard his wife died in a car crash, leaving him a single father. She straightened her necklace and fluffed her blonde hair. The past shouldn't still haunt her. She was a big girl now and learned to move on. She'd dated in the years since Wyatt and thought about her childhood best friend and one-time boyfriend Les, but she could never fully get Wyatt out of her head. Wyatt led his daughter toward the ramp. With her head low, Sandy clutched her bag and followed. Someone took Wyatt and his daughter's picture with a photo backdrop of the ship. Unlike Sandy's father, at least Wyatt clearly loved and cared for his own. But then, she always liked that protective part of his spirit. Once they were done, she snuck through without getting her picture taken. As she turned the corner, she almost slammed into Wyatt's shoulder. She kept her head down and hoped he didn't see her. However, her phone rang. With one glance, she read it was Penny, who immediately said, "Sandy, where are you? It must be nice to marry a man and be in love." Sandy gave up hope for those things for herself, though she kept a smile on a face. Helping with weddings was the next best thing, and maybe what she might as a career do if she sold her bridal shop, if she didn't design for Victoria in the House of Morgan. She covered her head as Wyatt glanced at her and right into her eyes. She trembled, though she wished she was stronger, as she wished to disappear into a hole in the ground. Almost on board. She took off her sunglasses. Why? My mother is driving me crazy. Yes. She understood part of her job as the maid of honor and wedding planner was to keep Penny away from Geneva, her mother. Geneva had tried to trick Penny into getting pregnant to force the wedding to happen. 10 minutes. There is a line to get on the ship. Wyatt's daughter took her hand. Sandy's heart pumped, and she nearly dropped her cell phone as she looked into his brown eyes again. Wyatt, Sandra. He nodded but didn't stop his daughter. They all walked in step for a second as the line moved slowly. On the phone, Penny said, "Tell my half-brother I'll need him." She lowered her phone. "Penny's mom is driving her crazy and she wants your help. We'll be there as soon as we can." His words were clear and sure. If Sandy's father or brother spoke about her like that, perhaps she'd have turned out different and stronger. She smiled as she said, "Did you hear him?" "Yes," Penny said. "I'm going to hide in the spa. Find me." "Of course." Sandy hung up and then took another few steps with Wyatt in line. The silence between them grew more apparent as families and couples whispered when they saw the ship. As they turned the next corner, he said, "You and Penny still talk like high school." Startled, she said nothing as they turned the corner. Wyatt added, "It seems like it was practically yesterday, seeing you both drinking coffee and jotting down math for mathletes while in your cheerleader gear. And now she's marrying Jay." In high school, she'd been absolutely in love with him, and he had known it. Before she could say anything, his daughter swung their hands in the air as she said, "Dad, did you know this lady when you were in school?" "Yes." Wyatt dropped down to one knee. "Charlotte, this is Sandra. Sandra is your Aunt Penny's best friend. We were all in the math league together. I didn't think she'd want me to speak to her, though. I'd like for us to talk again. It would be nice." Sandy surveyed the girl. No one in Wyatt's family had those wild curls his daughter had. Sandy nodded. "Nice to meet you. You're very pretty." Charlotte curtsied. "Who's this?" "This is my dog, Candy Cane." "She's her emotional support animal," Wyatt added. Charlotte hugged the terrier with a big, toothy grin. Clearly she had her father's charm. Wyatt stood and they walked a few feet. Sandy's heart melted as she winked. "So are you." Charlotte squeezed her hand. "Do you have a husband?" Jitters rushed through her as she fumbled to put her sunglasses into her bag. Wyatt should know this question sent her into anxiety. "No." "Why?" "Good." Her words were clear. At least she hadn't dropped her pocketbook. Charlotte's eyes narrowed. "A boyfriend?" Sandy broke up with her last boyfriend a year ago. It hadn't been that long, but Sandy couldn't quite picture him or remember his name with Wyatt standing so close. Caleb? Colin? No, Charles. She fidgeted with her bag. "Not at the moment. I've been dealing with my business. I haven't had the time." "Dad, I think she's perfect." Charlotte tugged their hands closer together as she held on to both of them. Wyatt's face darkened as he led them up the ramp. "No, Charlotte." Sandy glanced at the ship they were about to enter once the people in front passed security. Then she stared at Wyatt as they stepped forward. Something was going on. She curled her free hand to her side as she asked, "No what?" "My dad needs a wife." Sandy clutched her pendant. "What?" "Grandpa said it would keep me safe." Those words clearly weren't Charlotte's. She stared at Wyatt, whose cheeks were red. "Charlotte?" He massaged his chin. "Let's not tell Sandra everything." Charlotte shook her head and said, "My dad is staring at you, a lot. You should marry him." Wyatt's cheeks turned red. "Stop. We're here for your aunt's wedding to Sandra's cousin." Sandy's heart was still racing. If Wyatt looked at her in any special way, then maybe he regretted how they broke up years ago. The whisper in her heart had to be wrong, that there might ever be anything else. He'd cheated on her, and Charlotte was the evidence. Charlotte had no idea of Sandy's dark thoughts as she said, "Jay's your cousin? I don't have any cousins. Family is always good." Charlotte let her hand go. Their hand-holding must be done. Wyatt led Charlotte to slide her identity card through the machine and helped her pass security. Sandy followed behind them. Once all three of them were through, Wyatt said, "Charlotte, we're on board. Say goodbye to Sandra so we can get to our room." "Bye," Charlotte said with a huge smile, leading her dog. "I'd like you for a new mom." Sandy stared after the girl and her father. Other passengers brushed past her, but she didn't move. She should never speak to Wyatt, but if he asked her to marry her, then it might be a chance to prove to herself and everyone else that she could lead a normal life. Chapter 2. "Daddy, marry Sandra so I have a mom." Out of the mouths of innocence, whatever spark Charlotte saw when Wyatt glanced at Sandy couldn't be helped. She was his past, but there was no way he could explain to his daughter that Sandy Marshall thought he was the worst sort of devil. He changed his shirt to a light blue button-down that contrasted with his dark hair and eyes, and then figured out how to answer. "It's not that easy." Charlotte rummaged through her bag and found a coloring book as Candy Cane sat beside her, calm and peaceful. She plopped onto the bed and kicked her feet in the air. "Why not? She likes you." Like was probably more like despise, or even worse, forgotten. There was no way Sandy Marshall had thought about him for more than a second these past few years. He was the one that ruined his chances with her. He shook his head as he buttoned his shirt. "That's not possible." Charlotte's head popped up from the coloring book. "Why not? Too much water under the bridge." Not that he needed to explain that to his 5-year-old. He combed his hair and avoided her direct stare. "The last time we saw each other, I hurt her." "How?" "She found another woman in my apartment when she came to visit me." That wasn't something he could explain to Charlotte. He picked up a paisley tie and held it to his neck. "I never said I was sorry." Charlotte petted her dog. "So say sorry and then ask her to marry you." He tossed his tie into the closet. He'd do without it. He might be giving Penny away, but he didn't need to be confined yet. "Right now, I need to go help your Aunt Penny. We'll talk about us when I get back." His parents were coming to watch Charlotte. He paced. Then he flexed his muscles in the mirror and wondered if he had melted from being near Sandy Marshall earlier. He'd avoided the vanilla with colorful sprinkle scent since he returned to Miami a few weeks ago. Now he couldn't. His half-sister's wedding meant he'd be in close quarters with her. A knock sounded on the door, and he went to open it. He stepped out of the way to let his father inside. "Dad, I'm sure Penny is glad you're here." His father waved at Charlotte as he said, "Your mom came to babysit Charlotte, but at least we get to be united for once. Penny's mom is giving her a hard time." His mother wouldn't want any of them involved, but Penny was both a friend and his sister. Penny's mom had tried to break up his parents years ago when she tricked his father with her pregnancy, but his mother was also pregnant. His father had begged his mother to forgive him, and they were still together. However, Penny was still his half-sister, and they'd gone to school together. He'd not trade his sister for anything. "We'll do what we can for your sister. Any solution to the lawsuit?" After Jessica died, the man Jessica feared might be Charlotte's father, whom she had run from years ago, had threatened to take his daughter. It was clearly a money suit, but his parents never had to know all the details about his marriage. "No. But Jessica was my wife, and I won't let a stranger take Charlotte from me now. Is there any woman you can marry fast to show the court you're traveling around the world for the Marines is over and that you can provide a stable home?" This conversation should not be happening near her Charlotte, and they needed to not let her hear any more of this conversation. He walked out onto the balcony, waited for his father, and then closed the door. "I've already had one loveless marriage, Dad. Can't I want what Penny and Jay seem to have for once? First make an alliance, but have the lawyer ensure you have an out clause. Then, once your family is secure and no one can take our Charlotte, you can look for love." "Dad, I get it." He didn't expect the type of love that caused fireworks to go off inside his stomach from one touch of her skin. He had that summer after high school, with Sandy. Then he ruined everything. He tugged his shirt. "Penny's getting married. We'll talk about this later." He slid the balcony door open and kissed his daughter on her cheek. "Charlotte, stay with your grandpa. He's taking you to Grandma's, and I'm going to meet your Aunt Penny to see if she needs me." "Okay, Daddy," Charlotte said without worry. Candy Cane barked, like she was there for his daughter too. She was the best part of his short-lived marriage. Even if she wasn't his genetically, he'd proposed to Jessica to protect his daughter. Before she died, she had admitted she set him up to be her father's child, knowing he would provide Charlotte with security and protection from her abusive ex. He promised her he'd guard Charlotte with his life, and no one was going to take her away. As he walked through the corridor of the ship and headed up the stairs for the spa, he focused on his surroundings. The ship rocked gently in the Caribbean Sea as they sailed toward Cozumel. The blue waters would be soothing to see. Soon the ocean would surround them, and for the next few days, he had no worries. Penny was marrying Jay, whom he also knew from high school, and they made a sweet pair. As he rounded the last flight of stairs to the door of the spa and gym, he held his breath. Wyatt wondered if he'd see Sandy inside, and if she had any idea that his hands had a pins and needles sensation from his not touching her fight. She should hate him. Opening the door, he made his way to his sister, who was alone in one of those cone dryers reading a magazine. She stood, and he hugged her. "Penny, I got your text. My mother is driving me crazy," she said. She frowned, clearly unhappy with something as she checked her makeup in the mirror, though she looked great. Geneva, Penny's mom, was now happily married, from what he understood. "What's going on? She keeps insisting I'm pregnant, when thankfully I'm not." "Pregnant? Why would she do that?" Penny gave the attendant who'd walked in to check her hair a tip, and then returned to his side. "She thinks it will keep Jay close to me so he won't cheat." Jay wouldn't cheat on Penny when he'd clearly spent years in love with just the idea of her. But if he did, Wyatt would have to threaten him. "If you think Jay will cheat on you, then don't marry him." "I don't think that at all." Her calmness relaxed his muscles, though he'd still find Jay later and have a man-to-man. Penny went to the cashier and pointed at something on her face, and the cashier nodded as Penny paid. Once she returned, he asked, "Why would Geneva say that?" "Because she couldn't get everything she wanted in life, so she uses me to live the life she wanted." "I know the feeling." Jessica had done the same to him. She hadn't loved him, but she had loved the life he could provide for her. It was why his own wishes were thrown out the window of a speeding car. He put his hand in his pocket. "What do you need me to do?" "Why the sudden?" Penny arched her eyebrows at him, but then stopped. Her eyes widened as she glanced over his shoulder. "You're here, Sandy." He turned and stared at her. Sandy blushed as she looked away. "Am I interrupting? I got your frantic texts to meet you here." Penny took his hand and then reached out to take hers. "No, I'm glad you're both here. I'm hoping for two things from you both." Sandy avoided eye contact with him, but nodded. "What do you need, Pen?" Penny took a deep breath and sucked in her bottom lip. Once she was ready, she said, "1, I want you both to work together to ensure Geneva keeps her distance from both Jay and myself." He hadn't missed the drama of family relations while he was serving. He could recruit his own father to help. It was the least they could do. He nodded and asked, "Second?" Penny turned to Sandy. "Second, I want you both to pay attention to anything Kate might do or plan. I don't want either mother ruining this wedding." "Got it." Sandy was Jay's cousin, so she'd have more insight into whatever his mother intended than he ever would. This left him time to speak to Jay about his sister and avoid Sandy. Some woman at the spa waved for Penny, who said, "I have to go. I'm counting on you both." Right. He'd do whatever he could to ensure his sister was happy. She deserved to follow her heart. He waited until she left and then pivoted to leave. Sandy brushed against his arm for a second. The wave of warmth that descended from her fingertips as she touched him turned him on. He turned away. "Wyatt, do you have a minute?" "Yeah, Sandra?" "Sandy's fine from you." It was impossible to even think she'd forgive him or they could go backward in time. They might be very different people as adults, but one glance into her blue eyes made him wish for those summer nights again. Besides Charlotte, Sandy was the only one who ever made him feel soft and gooey in his heart. Chapter 3. More time alone with Wyatt made her a glutton for punishment, as just his presence caused her body to tremble with long-forgotten muscles. Sandy gulped and wished the sea air didn't all carry the almond flavor that was clearly Wyatt, as she said, "I was hoping we could clear the air in order to help Penny." The spa door closed behind them. He nodded, though she swore his tanned cheeks were flushed. "Fair enough. Come, let's get coffee and talk." Years ago, they met every single day for coffee. Penny, Jay, her brother Michael, dramatic Eva, and Wyatt. They had been her squad that helped her survive high school. A few years ago, when her own father had chosen death over going to prison for a Ponzi scheme, it was a relief to live on her trust fund. The federal government did not take that from her as she started her business. Friendships had grounded her. Her father wanted to be richer than Mitch Morgan so much that he'd ended up doing highly illegal moves to top him, and failed. Her and her brother's trust fund came from her mother, who died when she was a girl. Sounds great. They walked into the small cafe and ordered their coffee. Wyatt turned toward her. "Do you still take the white mocha with whip?" Her heart fluttered. He remembered. Yes. He nodded and turned toward the cashier to order for them. One white mocha with whip and one regular coffee. They stood in silence as they waited for the barista to make their drinks. Sandy wasn't sure how to bring up their past, and that wasn't what she needed to speak to him about anyhow. She was here for Penny and Jay, but she had so much to say to Wyatt. Despite everything, she missed him. Their order showed up at the bar. Once they both had their drinks, he led them to a table. She sat and pushed her shoulders backward. "I miss our old coffee hangout." A smile crossed his face. "Where you adopted Penny like a school project." The same teasing as years ago. Her lips twitched to match his smile, but then she narrowed her eyes. This wasn't the past, and she wasn't the girl who worshipped him. She is my friend. Sandy, you were my entire world once. He was her universe and stars in the night sky, but life hadn't worked out for them. Perhaps if he felt that, then he could at least tell her what had happened and why he'd stomped on her heart. Then what happened? Then Jessica, the mention of her name wasn't enough. If she knew why he chose another woman over her, perhaps she could forget about him. She sipped her drink and stared at him. "So she became your world?" He sat straighter. "I became involved." She wanted more than 3 words from him. To move on meant she could ask without getting her hopes and heart involved. This was all ancient history. "Wyatt, I thought we were clearing the air." He slumped his shoulders, drank some of his coffee, and then set it on the table. His hands were close to hers. That was a long time ago now. Not really. Her life slowed down and became boring. No other man ever stirred her heart. Closure was necessary if she was to never dream about what might have been. It was time to ask and be done with Wyatt forever. The whisper in her heart shouldn't matter. "I'd still like to hear what happened. How did you get involved so fast that you didn't find time to call me and break up before moving in with her?" "That's not true. Why deny this now?" He married Jessica a week after Sandy walked in and right out. Her hands curled around her coffee cup and gripped it harder. "I met Jessica in your apartment. We didn't live together then." Semantics. It was days, but clearly she'd walked into a major life changer without any notice. "Then why didn't you tell me that day and tell me that she was lying?" Wyatt didn't move at all except to look down to the ground. "Because she was pregnant. She just told me less than 5 minutes before you showed up, with your daughter." She had walked into a heavy conversation. Wyatt looked at her again and nodded. Yes, good. Admission meant she could ask questions, forgive, and then move on with her own life. She leaned forward. "If you were so in love with me, why did you have sex with Jessica?" "I waited for you." A laugh escaped her lips. "Clearly not." His face went white. "No, The night it happened, I was waiting to drive to the airport to get you, but at the last second you canceled your flight for a test. She had explained why and changed the dates. But I rebooked for the next weekend. He sat straighter, looked at her, and nodded like he'd been given the green light. That night, October 23rd, I remember drinking a lot. I don't remember doing more than lifting my hands and Jessica climbing in my lap. Then a few weeks later, Jessica was pregnant, and I had to protect her. I will be sorry my entire life for how I hurt you. His words were like fireworks that made her entire body come alive. So much for forgetting. It sounded like Wyatt was pulled into a trap, much like Penny's mother had done to his own father. She pushed her hair off her shoulders. I wish you had told me this years ago. His cheeks reddened. I hated that I hurt you. If you want me to keep my distance for the next few days, I will. No. She reached across the table and placed her hands on his. Her heart whispered to give him another chance, but she wasn't going to decide that right now. She smiled at him. Look, we're adults now, and Penny needs both of us. I'm glad we talked about this. I needed to hear your side of the story. His hands jerked, but he didn't move them away. Me too. For a moment, neither of them moved a muscle. Then the screech of his chair echoed in the room as he scooted out like they were done and left her in her seat. She wasn't ready for this to be over. Wait, he put his hands on hers and settled again. What? This wasn't how she'd intended this conversation to go. They were here for the wedding and Penny. She had also promised her cousin Jay the groom. She tilted her head and stared at Wyatt. He looked like a Marine still, with that short brown hair and neatly pressed clothes. His brown eyes pierced through her heart and made her body weak. You make Kate nervous. I'd like for you to join me for a few minutes at the bar. All you have to do is pretend to be absolutely interested in me. He narrowed his eyes. Why do I make Kate nervous? At least he hadn't asked how he could possibly still be interested in her, not that Wyatt ever would be. He was the standard most men could never meet, and her last boyfriend Charles would have said exactly the same thing. She shook off the thought. Your father is a retired general. You're fresh out of the Marines. I was a lieutenant colonel, and that rank only lasted a few weeks. I didn't want to work my way up to general. There is more to life. At least, I think there is. There was more to life. Perhaps she'd remind him. Or she'd forget about him easier if she spent time with him. It wasn't like she had anything to lose. Yes, but your love of your country, it's something Kate doesn't understand. I want to see her reaction near you. Your eyes alone remind me of Superman and his whole truth and justice stance. A real blush grew on his face. I don't really know Jay's mother. Marines took orders, didn't they? She kept her hand on his as she scooted out of the chair. Just think of this as a recon mission. This way we're helping Jay and Penny like we promised. Then consider me yours. Hers? She kept his hand and directed him in the direction of the main courtyard of the ship as she said, For 15 minutes, I'm sure you'll make my heart swoon there, Optimus Prime. His nickname in high school football had slipped out of her lips. He stopped moving and tugged her hand to stop. She turned to him to see how serious his face became. I haven't played football in years, Sandy. Good, she winked. I know. I saw every game. Now let's go. This wedding might turn out to be the best medicine she could ask for. She had a second chance at finding out if all that longing was simply because she'd imagined her life a certain way and was upset someone had stolen her plans, or if she truly lost out on a real love. As long as she kept her head clear, she'd be fine. This time, she wasn't a little girl who'd lost her favorite toy. Walking down the hall, holding Wyatt's hand, hope gushed through her veins. Chapter 4. Sandy smelled like vanilla and lavender, and her 1,000-watt smile made him hunger for a life he had no right to even dream about. As she walked ahead of him, the sway of her hips hypnotized him, and her long blonde hair looked like gold. She squeezed his hand as the door closed and she surveyed the cocktail party. Some of the wedding guests were near the bar, and others were on the dance floor. This was the pre-ceremony setting sail get-together. Sandy stood on her tiptoes, and he leaned down as she whispered in his ear, "Wyatt, it might be best if we dance over there." Their first kiss flashed in his mind. He'd met her in their coffee shop, where he asked her to prom, and then she had thrown her arms around his neck and kissed him. He pursed his lips. "I don't dance." "Lies you can tell your other women. You took me to prom and danced all night." Then she dragged him closer to the dance floor. No excuse popped into his head. He held his arms stiff as his hands settled on her hips, and another memory surfaced. Her lying beside him on those white hotel sheets. Sandy was unforgettable. Then he went all out and twirled her. She laughed, and the sound made the room lighter somehow. As she returned to his arms, he said, "Okay, I don't dance with anyone but you. Keep talking that way. I like remembering my first love. It makes me feel young and innocent." Technically, we weren't that innocent. The memory of prom night, when he'd rented them a room without their friends knowing, flashed in his mind as a major adventure. In their small group, they both told people they were going together as friends, though the second he had asked her to go had been the moment she kissed him, ending their friendship-only status. He held her firmer in his grip as he whisked her around the floor. She held his arm like she belonged there. "I think you forget how cynical Miami people are, and how none of us are truly innocent." Clearly, she denied her true nature. "You're a natural-born cheerleader, Sandy. It's part of your charm." "So I am charming. That's good to hear." The song ended and they both stood still. "Good to see I didn't forget how to flirt." "Forget?" Another song began. This one was faster, by a boy band Sandy had gushed over when she was 13. He held out his hand to dance again as she said, "Funny all these little stories you tell yourself these days about what you're good at and what you are willing to do." Life had changed for him, and there was no turning the clock back, despite how right it felt holding Sandy again. Charlotte needed to be signed up for school soon. No more kisses from Sandy were in his future. "I'm a dad now." As he turned the corner with her in his arm, Sandy asked, "When was Charlotte born?" The day he'd never forget. April 30th. That's not 9 months later. This was why they were both on the math team together. Sandy would figure that out. He'd never even spoken to his mother about this, but Sandy had been the one hurt in the whole thing. Out of the mess, he'd become a dad. His mind flashed to how he held his tongue when questioned, but he had to tell her. "No, it's 32 weeks after conception. I'm trusting you not to tell anyone about this." She missed a step. "What?" He lowered his head, stopped dancing, and whispered near her ear so only she could hear. "Jessica tried to tell me she was born early, but Charlotte was 7.5 pounds. Most babies that young are much smaller. Her story always had holes in it to me, but Charlotte's birth weight was the last straw. So she lied to you." Her voice was louder, and people stared at them. Now was not the time to discuss this. They were in public, though he had waited years to tell Sandy already. He said, so low only she heard him, "Aren't we here to spy on your Aunt Kate?" Her face flushed as she nodded. They both began to dance again, changing the subject. "Okay, I'll let you off the hook for now, but technically she's my aunt-in-law. I'd prefer not to be related to her." He'd missed something. If she hurt Sandy as well as Jay, then she could hurt Penny as well. He tightened his hand on her waist. "What did she do to you?" She sighed, placed her hand on his heart, and whispered, with a fierceness she rarely showed, "She turned in evidence against my father to save herself, and acted like she had no idea about anything. I wouldn't be surprised if the Ponzi scheme was her idea in the first place." That's harsh. Instinctively, he held her closer, like he could protect her, then stopped. He lessened his hold on her waist, but still kept his frame. Their dance lessons after school from the old Russian lady to prepare for prom had been her idea. He had gone along because her kiss had been all the thanks he ever needed. She lowered her lashes but held his gaze. "I've become meaner in my old age, I guess." "No, She was still perfect. One kiss from her might send him into orbit. He held her hand higher in the air, so she looked up. You? Old? Sandy Marshall, you are still the brightest star in the night sky. Her eyes widened. I knew you were still good at flirting. Yes, his lips now ached to know if her kiss still sent him over the edge. The room felt electric, but then the rest of the room flashed in more color than he wished. Behind Sandy, Kate spoke to ship personnel. Who is the crew Kate's talking to? Sandy turned her head but stayed in his arms. Then she stared at him again. I don't know. If they could identify this person, then they had a way to stop whatever Kate might do to his sister. Reach in my back pocket and get my camera. Why? He turned them so they were closer. I think it's time to take a selfie. Huh? The blank expression on her face told him she had no idea what his idea was. He leaned closer. We'll get the guy's picture for identification. A huge smile grew on her face. Then she fluffed her hair, like she was a model, as she reached behind him and took out his phone. Good idea. She wrapped her hand around his shoulder like they were posing for a selfie as he took forward-facing pictures of Kate with the ship guy. Goosebumps grew on his arm as she held him. Once they were done, he turned the camera forward and snapped one real selfie of them to remember this moment. Then he put it away. What's the plan once we ID this guy? Demand the guy tell him if anything was planned, as he couldn't threaten Kate with physical force if she went after his sister again, but he had to ensure no one harmed Penny. Ensure that whatever he spoke about with Kate doesn't interfere with the wedding. When are you going to do that? I'm going to check on my daughter when we're done here. Then I'll head to the information desk and find out who the guy is. I'll want to talk to him alone. Let me know when you're done, of course. Good. Kate finished her discussion. Sandy wrapped her hand around his arm and tugged him forward, which caused him to almost forget why he was here. Let's go interrupt now. He followed because he wasn't sure what else to do. Once they stood in front of Kate, he stood taller as Sandy asked, Kate, how are you? Kate sipped her champagne and then stared at both of them with her arms crossed. Sandra, I see you're having a good time. I am. Sandy then stood on her tiptoes and hugged him. Kate stiffened and tilted her head. Clearly. So, how are the wedding plans? Sandy bounced as she smiled. Great. Everything is on track. Tonight, everything should be beautiful. Kate sipped her champagne again as she frowned. We're counting on you to ensure the Marshall name still shines. Sandy's blue eyes darkened. I always do my best. Kate finished her champagne and still stood with her arms crossed as she asked, How is your brother Michael? He's keeping Jay company. Jay invited him a game of mini-golf. Sandy softened her voice and then looked at him. I know they're meeting with a ship steward later to ensure the venue is ready. They're supposed to call me afterward. At least my son has someone in the family to watch out for him, and he's not entirely surrounding himself with vultures. His heart nearly stopped. Who was the vulture? Sandy then placed her hand on his chest like she could restart it as she said, Penny's a nice girl, and they are clearly in love. Kate motioned for another champagne glass from the passing waiter. She picked it up off the tray as she said, If you say so, I will be here to watch his execution into middle-class values. No one should insult Penny. He stepped forward. He's marrying my sister. Kate held up her glass like she was saluting him. Cheers, Colonel. Happy sailing. Who did Jay's mother think she was? Wyatt's hand curled into a fist, but Sandy pulled him away. He followed as he couldn't think of one thing to say to her that would make himself feel better or protect Penny. They walked out into the bright sun, and the humidity weighed on his shoulders. As they made it to the cafeteria area and the air conditioning, he asked Sandy, Did she just say marrying my sister was her son's execution? Pretty much. Sandy hadn't even blinked. She pointed to the ice cream machine, and he followed her directions. She took out 2 bowls and handed him one as he said, Penny deserves better. She turned on the machine and ice cream poured out as she said, "Penny and Jay both have controlling mothers. I think it was one of the similarities that brought them together as soulmates." Soulmates? She turned off the machine, handed him a bowl to add things to, and turned to fill the second bowl. Yes, why the question? He'd hurt her. Perhaps it was all one-sided on his part in the past. He lowered his voice and said, "I'm surprised you still believe in soulmates, Sandy. Just because my own love life took a huge detour after you left doesn't mean I can't believe in happy ever afters." She then went to the side bowls for the ice cream and decided between sprinkles and chocolate chips. Hot fudge? I'll get my own. He poured nuts onto his bowl and then went to the hot fudge. She made up a bowl filled with pink and white sprinkles and chocolate chips and then topped it off with whipped cream. Once she was done, she put it in his hands. "We have to get going. Here, take this and give it to Charlotte. If I ever have a child, I'd want to cherish every second I can." Charlotte would like this. As Sandy turned to leave, his world felt darker. "Will you eat dinner with us tonight?" Had he asked that? A smile flickered on her face, and she nodded. "Sounds nice. I have to check in on my brother and your sister to see if they need anything else. I can meet you for dinner before the wedding." She wasn't as excited as in the prom moment, but he still had to test his reaction. He closed the gap between them. She licked her lips and stared into his brown eyes. "I look forward to it." "Me too." Then he lowered his head. Right before he kissed her, he waited. If she wanted him to stop, he'd respect that. She deserved more than him, but she stayed in his arms, closed her eyes, and puckered her lips. His lips met hers. There was nothing else in the world besides Sandy and him in that moment. She sighed, and then deepened their kiss. He'd spent years wishing and telling himself to forget paradise. Now that was gone. As their kiss ended, she smiled. Definitely later. Perfect. Once again, the world had sunshine in it. He stayed next to her, but at the stairs he broke the closeness and ascended to his room. Right now, he had to get back to his daughter. Tonight, he'd spend time with his lost angel again. Chapter 5. That kiss changed everything. Sandy's lips still had zaps of electricity as she walked into the chapel on the top floor of the ship and peeked inside. The white room had pale pink backlighting and pink peonies tied to ribbons that decorated every aisle. The altar was decorated with peonies mixed with white hydrangeas. In her mind's eye, she imagined Wyatt telling her, "I love you," as they stood surrounded by friends and family. If she married Wyatt, this would be perfect. The sound of the door opening brought her back to reality. She lowered her head as her cousin Jay walked in the door, alone. He closed the door behind him. "What did you and Wyatt find out?" They'd found out she was still attracted to him. But that wasn't what Jay meant. All they had was the picture of the staff, but hopefully that proved nothing, and no one tried to stop the wedding. She stilled and chose what to say to her cousin. It was probably best not to include the groom on his wedding day, if there was trouble. "Wyatt is double-checking our one lead, but I don't think she's doing anything other than spreading her poison. I am sorry about your dad." Jay saw his mother clear enough. Still, she blushed. She knew her father was guilty, and she hated him, but Jay's understanding of her situation made him more like another brother, not only a cousin. "We both know the deal. Let's not discuss that. How do you like the wedding arrangements?" He glanced at some flowers on the one step of the altar and shrugged. "This is what Penny wants." She rearranged some flowers. It was better than talking about her father. "I followed her orders. You did a great job organizing all this." Jay turned and stared at the backlighting. She walked to the next table to straighten the arrangement and gently nudged his arm with her shoulder. "So you like the decorations?" Her cell phone sang and the screen read alarm. She had set that to ensure she had time to dress. She cleared it as Jay asked, "Do you have someplace else to be?" Wyatt waited for her. Her skin jumped as she thought about the possibility of another kiss. Her face flushed as she focused on her cousin. "I'm having dinner with Wyatt before the wedding. I'm glad you're talking to him again," Jay said, and then stared harder into her blue eyes. "Are you excited about Wyatt?" "I am, a little." No one knew they'd dated, and he broke her heart. They certainly didn't know that she still liked kissing him, that he tasted better than anyone else. She picked her words. "We cleared the air." He beamed as he checked his phone. "You, your brother, our friend Eva, and Wyatt were always our chosen family in high school. Can't you tell me what happened between you two, now that it's over?" Perhaps secrets were their problem. This time, if there was a this time, she'd encourage both of them to be public about any relationship. "What's to say? I loved him, he married someone else." "Loved?" Jay's blue eyes had a gleam that read shocked. Then he recovered and shrugged. "His wife is dead now. You can have him if you want. Now if something did happen, she could talk about it." "Yes." Jay crossed his arms. "Don't get hurt like last time. Secrecy was the past. She'd not hold back again if there was." No, she needed to stop saying that. She wanted Wyatt again. The kiss had cemented what her mind always reminded her in her dreams. She stepped closer to the doors. Soon she'd meet Wyatt for dinner, and this was her second chance. She followed Jay. "You don't know the half of it, cousin. I won't burden you with more details. Go, get ready for your wedding tonight." Wedding planning on a cruise ship was the easiest thing she'd ever experienced. The staff knew what they were doing, which left her with lots of time. However, it was still her job to ensure everyone was happy. As Jay opened the door for her, she asked, "Michael is keeping you company until it's go time." They walked down the stairs and onto the bright deck below as he said, "Yes, we have room service and video games competition round 2 in my suite." She shaded her eyes to block the sun. "I'm going." She turned to go into the shade and the stairs to her room. Then her cousin said, "Wait. What, Jay?" She turned and again had to block the light from her eyes. He came closer. She blinked and stared at him as he said, "Have a good time with Wyatt, but don't fall in love with him or anyone else unless he loves you back." Good advice. She wrapped her arms around him and kissed his cheek. "Thanks, Jay." She rushed to her room and changed. Her maid of honor dress hung near the door. Then she found her ice blue beaded dress that matched her eyes. While this was more formal and for the wedding after party, it would wow Wyatt at dinner. Perfect. Also being dressed up made her feel beautiful, so she laid that on her bed. Then she took out her makeup, and half an hour later she was ready. She slipped out of her room and made her way to the formal dining hall. As approached the maitre d', Wyatt put his hand on her back. She turned around and saw his gray suit fitting his body perfectly, showing off his muscles. His eyes sparkled as he said, "You look amazing." "Thank you." Her body heated as she clutched her pendant. "I had to do my face for the wedding, so I wanted a dress to match it." "You're beautiful without any makeup on, Sandy. You know that." She looked to her right and saw the steps to the small specialty restaurant. She said, "Thanks. What are you doing out here alone?" He pointed to the right. "Kate and Geneva are having dinner together in the French restaurant." "Were they fighting?" He shook his head. "No, they were drinking like old buddies." Strange. If they weren't fighting and not plotting against the wedding, then what they chose to do wasn't her concern. "I don't want to think about the wedding for 20 minutes. Agreed. He then offered his arm, which she looped her hand in. He led her to a table where she saw General Austin Colburn and his wife, Marianne, who sat with Charlotte. He hadn't said this was a family dinner. She tugged on his arm and asked politely, "Wyatt, why are your parents at the table?" "'Cause they are my parents," he whispered back, like this wasn't his idea. Then he straightened his tie. "They refused to leave when I told Charlotte we were having dinner with you." He tried to lead her forward, but she held her ground. "I don't do well with parents." He nodded and then whispered in her ear. After the appetizers, they promised to leave. The nearness of him sent a heat wave through him. Then she followed him. Okay, I guess. As they neared the table, he said, "They won't judge you based on your own parents, if that's your fear. My father is in prison. Yours is retired as a general." She straightened her shoulders like she was about to join cadet school. He patted her hand and then let it go to pull out her chair. The last time she'd seen either of his parents was when they were still dating. His father stood, and Wyatt said, "They know you are my old friend, and we're hoping you'll marry our son, Sandy." The general hadn't blinked. Her eyes widened as she stared. Had she just heard that, or was that her imagination? No words formed on her lips. As Wyatt came and stood next to her, she heard her heartbeat and finally said, "What?" Wyatt glared at his father. "Don't." His mother offered Sandy a piece of bread from the basket on the table. Then his father said, "Has he told you about the lawsuit?" Sandy's hand shook as she dropped the croissant onto her plate. She glanced at Wyatt. His father clearly had something to say. "No, not really." Wyatt stared at his father. "Stop." The general stared at her. "Jessica's boyfriend before she married our Wyatt went to court to claim paternity of our Charlotte. He also stated during closed doors that he'll happily take a buyout and walk away. Wyatt refuses to budge, and most of the court documents try to say that our boy isn't stable enough in one place to raise a daughter." His mother added, "Wyatt quit his job to take care of Charlotte." Wyatt whispered something to his daughter. Sandy drained a glass of water. It seemed like Wyatt had been tricked into being a father, and the night he'd cheated on her was a setup. If this was true, then she could forgive him. Without him, she'd been unhappy for years. It would be nice to start over, his father said. His lawyer suggested if he married someone else, then the case has no chance. She coughed, and the water threatened to come back up her throat as she placed the glass on the table. Marriage was a step above rekindling an old flame. Wyatt pursed his lips. "He also said my case was strong without a wedding, Dad." The general never blinked. "To protect Charlotte, we need to cover our bases." The table fell silent. The whole family clearly loved Charlotte, who sat holding her grandmother's hand. Wyatt's mother said, "We should leave them alone now, Austin. Charlotte wants to join us." And I said yes. The general put his napkin on the table. "So, will you marry Wyatt, Sandy?" Marian stood and fixed her dress. The general pushed his chair back. The Colburns clearly loved each other. It would be nice for Sandy to have a family beyond just her brother. She had never had particularly caring parents. A warm buzz ran up her spine. "He'll need to ask me once we're alone." General Colburn's eyes widened as he smiled at his wife. "So that's a yes?" Wyatt's quietness and intense stare at her made her jittery. "I didn't say that." His father held out his hand for Charlotte as he said to Sandy, "You didn't say no. Now come, Charlotte, join your grandmother and I for dinner elsewhere, and let's leave these two alone." The three of them left them at the table. Waiters milled around as they delivered food to other table. Once they were sure they were alone, Wyatt said, "I'm sorry about my father. He can be demanding. He's looking out for his granddaughter." She needed to hear the words from Wyatt. Had he been cornered in a marriage once before? Jessica once again came to her mind. She had to know. By selling out his only son, she picked up her water again. She shouldn't have said anything at all. Her face felt hot as she stared into her glass. "So you don't want to marry me?" "It's not a problem." Absolutely not. Her spine tingled. There was no way she'd look him in the eye right now. "Okay then. No, I mean, I don't want to marry you to save Charlotte. Sandy Marshall, I've been in love with you our entire lives. Being apart and with another left my heart broken. Will why took her so sut. Love was another matter entirely." "What are you saying?" He pushed his chair back and then offered her his hand. "I'm saying, can we leave the dining room so we can talk privately? Lead the way." If he asked her to marry him, she'd say yes. The thought hit her hard and fast. She had a full life, but she could have even more if she spent every day with Wyatt. Her skin was electric as she followed him out of the restaurant. Chapter 6. Next to Wyatt, Sandy felt alive. People stared at the pair of them. They were dressed for a wedding, not walking in a corridor. Her high heels contrasted with the family in swimsuits that walked in front of them. She leaned closer to Wyatt. "Let's go to my room. No one will disturb us." "Are you sure? I figured we could find a quiet corner to talk." "Absolutely." There was no quiet corner for the pair of them as they were, and she had no roommate or children, and, if she was honest with herself, she hoped for a kiss again if there was no one watching. She directed his arm to the elevator. No place is more private than behind closed doors. Seconds later, they were in a glass elevator that looked down to the main floor of the ship. The air smelled of his pine-scented cologne. When the elevator stopped, they stepped outside. Another high school friend, Eva Bishop, stared at both of them. She must have been waiting to go down. As they turned, Sandy nodded her hello. Eva placed her hand on Sandy's shoulder and squeezed as they traded places with her in the elevator. "Sandy, Wyatt, I'm glad I ran into you." Something seemed odd. She hadn't questioned Wyatt's presence at all. Eva just smiled. Sandy tilted her head and asked, "Why, Eva? What's going on?" Eva hit the button for her floor and said, "I just want to remind you that I'm a working actress." "What? Why are you saying that?" "Actress." Alarm bells rang in Sandy's head. Eva waved at them as the elevator doors closed. "When you find out, ensure the cameras are rolling. Catch you both later." The ship had its own employees in their shows. Eva was here as a wedding guest. Sandy turned to Wyatt and asked, "What was that?" He shrugged, then took her hand in his. Fireworks exploded within her. She licked her lips as he said, "I don't know. Let's go." "Yes." She led him to her room. Prom night and how it had been her, there. First time replayed in her mind. They'd quickly figured out their own bodies. Those memories were sweet and, from her adult conversations with others, rare. She fished out her card and opened the door, only to hear someone stomping inside. Wyatt went first, but her mind picked up instinctively that it was her brother. As she turned the corner, she saw him with her suitcase. She crossed her arms. "Michael, what are you doing here?" Her brother stared right through her and to Wyatt. "Good to see you again, Wyatt. Are you here to break my sister's heart again?" Wyatt stepped back. "That was never my plan. But it happened." Michael pulled a white phone charger from her suitcase and zipped up her bag, breaking the man-to-man staring game they'd just played. She took a deep breath and then tapped her foot. "Michael, you are supposed to be with Jay." He pushed her bag back in the closet and turned around as he held up what he came for. "He went to see his bride, and I needed a cell phone charger, so I came to borrow yours." Next time, she wouldn't list Michael as her brother for emergencies. A charger was not an emergency. She shook her head. "Fine, take it and leave." As Michael passed them both, he stopped in front of her and glared at Wyatt again. "Sis, whatever happened between you and Wyatt clearly made you unhappy. It's my duty to ensure it doesn't happen again." She gently nudged him toward the door. "My life is my own." Wyatt nodded at Michael. "I don't intend to hurt Sandy." She stepped in front of him like she could stop the men from fighting. Not that she expected them to. "Don't explain anything, Wyatt. Eva's talking about acting. Go find your girlfriend." "She's not my girlfriend." Michael opened her cabin door as Wyatt said, "I swear on my honor that I am here to make Sandy happy." Then Michael winked. She sucked in her breath as she read how he saw this as a hookup now. The smirk said it all. "See that you do." Then he left. She lowered her gaze. "Sorry about that." Wyatt's hand brushed against her cheek. She sighed as he said, "Don't be." "Are you Charlotte's father?" His eyes darkened, and he turned away from her, toward the windows to her balcony. "Legally, yes. Emotionally, yes. No one is taking her from me." This must be hard on him. She needed him to tell her clearly, though. She swallowed. "But genetically, are you her father?" He rubbed his temples and then shook his head. "No. Jessica told me before she passed how she saw me and set me up. I was a first-class idiot who fell for her lies. Your honor has always separated you from everyone else." She reached for his arm and massaged his shoulder. He blushed. "That doesn't make me feel better, but I gained my daughter, so it worked out." He turned toward her and placed his hand in hers. "Please don't tell anyone. I have to trust you. It's dangerous to mention this at all." No one would hear a word from her concerning his daughter. "I won't breathe a word. I only want to help you. But I need to work through everything in my mind. Can I ask one more thing?" He dropped his hand. "What?" She took a deep breath and sat on the couch as she motioned for him to join her. Once they were settled, she put one leg up and made herself comfortable. "How did you end up with Jessica that night I canceled my trip? Was she in your apartment and you were already having an affair? I just want a clear picture of events." He lowered his head. "I went to a bar that night. I was drinking. Jessica asked me to walk her to her car. So it wasn't even in your apartment? You stopped at her car?" I lost my head in that one moment. I wish I hadn't, but it happened, and then I let my honor rule my actions to do the right thing for my daughter. They'd lost so much. Her heart ached for him as her body melted into warmed-up butter on the stove. "So you didn't demand a DNA test that weekend?" He turned, and his muscular abs connected with her knee. "It never even occurred to me. I was too worried about losing you and what I should do to protect Jessica and Charlotte. I was 19 and a hot mess, just after high school, and he had to be an adult for his daughter." Her heart had been broken, but she went back to college, dated, and had no responsibilities. She would have stood by him, though. Her hands went into fists. "Why didn't you tell me the truth then?" "I wanted to. I wanted to tell you everything and apologize. I wanted to do it in person, but time was not my friend. Then I realized I was too late when you went out with Bobby." Her mind went blank. She blinked. "Bobby? I don't remember him." "March 17th. I went home to visit my parents and took Jessica. We weren't married yet, but she was very pregnant. I went to find you, but you were out with Bobby Draxton." Drax, her father's associate's son. She was supposed to entertain him that day while her father and his spoke business. It definitely wasn't a date. Oh, that was a setup. It didn't mean anything. You took him to our coffee shop, and to me, that meant you'd moved on. So I agreed to marry Jessica. Everything had gone wrong. Now her hand went halfway to her head, and then she changed her direction and reached out for his hands. "Oh, Wyatt?" He swallowed and hesitated. "Is there anything else you want to know?" Their past was a series of misunderstandings, but now they could put the mistakes behind them. Her heart lightened as she thought about the future and Wyatt being with her again. "Do you want to marry me now?" He squeezed her hand. "I want you more than I wanted presents on Christmas morning as a boy." Her room phone rang. It had to be someone on the ship, and the only one who would call was Penny or Jay. She blinked. "I should get that. I am helping with the wedding." He scooted over and handed her the room phone. Penny said in one breath, "Sandy, my mother is here and I can't find Wyatt." "Wyatt?" She mouthed Penny's name to him and then felt her face heat. "I know where he is. We'll both be right there." A moment later, she hung up and stood in front of him, holding her hand out. "Your sister needs us." "I never ID'd the man," he said as he stood and wrapped his hands around her. "Let's deal with whatever is going on first," she said. Wyatt pushed hair off her forehead and leaned down. She closed her eyes and wrapped her arm around his neck. When he kissed her, nothing else mattered. Chapter 7. Sandy and Wyatt exchanged looks and then opened the door to the bridal suite near the chapel. Her heart pounded as they dashed from the elevator. Something was wrong. She took a deep breath, and they walked in together. Sandy pasted a smile on her face as she stared at the back of her best friend's dress. "Penny, you look amazing." Then Penny turned around and Sandy saw that her best friend's cheeks were puffy and her eyes were glassy. She collapsed into a nearby seat for the vanity. "Eva." Sandy grabbed a box of tissues while Wyatt leaned closer. She handed Penny a tissue as she asked, "What about her?" Penny wiped away her tears and stopped speaking. Sandy reached out for her hand. Wyatt said, "Sis, tell us so we can help you fix it." Penny stared at her brother with her chin still trembling, like she needed to let out a cry. She said she was pregnant with Jay's baby. She what? Sandy shrieked. Eva was their friend. Yes, Eva dated Jay before Penny returned to Miami, but that ended as soon as Jay saw Penny again. Jay hadn't glanced at Eva since Penny arrived. It was impossible. Then Eva's words in the elevator rang in her head. Penny reached out and took her brother's hand. She said they were having an affair, and an accident happened. Again, Sandy glanced at Wyatt, whose other hand curled into a fist. What did Jay say? I can't find him. Penny sniffled. Wyatt needed to remember what Eva said in the hallway. His face became flushed as their gazes met for a moment. Sandy turned to Penny. Eva reminded us in the hall she was a paid actress. I think someone paid her to say that to you. Penny let out a sigh. She took her hands out of theirs and patted her eyes with the tissue. I thought she was lying, but why would she do that to me? I know we're not close friends, not like you are with her, but that's just mean. She needed the money, and Jay's mother wants you to leave him, Sandy said, as she was the only one in the group who knew Eva's situation. Her last play wasn't well received and closed early, leaving her without an income for a few months. It's true, Wyatt said. He had no way of knowing, but it was good he believed her. We should still ask Jay, though. I don't want my sister marrying a man who she never even discussed this with. Penny nodded. You're right. Go find Jay. We can all go. I'll stand behind you, Wyatt said. Sandy brushed a speck of dust off the wedding gown as Penny stood and said, I can't. He blinked. Why not? Penny tugged at her dress a little. I'm in my wedding dress. Wyatt, I need you to go get him. Wyatt straightened his shoulders, then crossed his arms. To do what? Bring him to you or throw him overboard? No, don't do that. Penny's hands waved and then settled on her sides. Sandy's right. This has to be a lie. Ask him about it. If he denies touching Eva, and I think he will, then get him to the chapel. I don't want a second mix-up. Wait, Wyatt. Your phone. This was easy to fix, but then Sandy's gut reminded her that they needed to find out about the ship officer that spoke to Kate. It had been their one job. There might be another problem. Wyatt nodded at her and then opened the photos on his phone. He showed Penny the picture. Do you know this guy? Penny nodded. He's the captain. He's to marry us in an hour. Something struck in Sandy's brain. This wasn't good. Whatever was planned, they had to avert disaster. Kate was getting him to agree to something. Jay and I already agreed to take care of the legal stuff on Monday when we reach port, Penny said. So technically, all they will do is ruin the ceremony. I want to ask Jay about Eva, though. We should talk. Well, that was news. Sandy's friends were technically already married. This did explain the lack of nerves. Okay, but be on guard. Wyatt, get Jay, and when you get him here, I'll go with you to see the captain. I won't let anything happen to the ceremony. For a moment, her gaze met Wyatt's, and nothing else in the world mattered. She understood from one glance that they were on the same page. Once Wyatt left, Penny returned to the vanity. She took a deep breath, smiled, and said, Sandy, I need you to help me fix my makeup and keep my mother out of here. Penny handed her the airbrush and pointed to the spots near her eyes as Sandy said, I haven't seen her since she ate with Kate. Sandy stared the airbrush machine. Thankfully, her classes in beauty for her wedding shop came back to her. Perhaps she should sell her store to Victoria Morgan and go into wedding planning. This was fun, though she liked designing wedding dresses. The offer included the option to design wedding dresses under the Morgan name. Penny closed her eyes. I don't even want to know. So, what's going on with you and Wyatt? Nothing. Wyatt and she weren't anything. Not yet. They had shared a few kisses on the ship, but nothing was defined. Penny opened her eyes. Now that is a lie. Caught. Her old friends knew her quirks. We talked about the past. All 6 of us were great friends. Penny gently grabbed her wrist. So spill. Sandy held her breath for a second. She swallowed and then let out the air to take a moment for herself. Finally, she was ready. Wyatt and I were more than friends. Penny narrowed her eyes. He was your prom date. He was my first love and my boyfriend. We just never told you. Sandy opened her eyes and saw the blank expression on Penny's face. Penny took her hand. Why would you have kept that from me? We didn't want to change our group, and we didn't want my father's disapproval. You know how that used to scare me. Sandy picked up the airbrush gun to ensure Penny glowed under the spotlight tonight. Penny waved the makeup off as she leaned closer. But Wyatt married Jessica. He had a baby right after college. Sandy clutched her stomach as she recalled that moment she saw Jessica and her entire universe changed. I remember. Look, I know we went to different colleges, but I was upset all of freshman year. I lost 20 pounds when everyone else gained. Penny stood and hugged her. Sandy, I didn't know. I'm sorry. This was the past. It was good she had friends again, and reconnecting to the people that mattered gave her something that made her heart soar. It must be hope for the future. She pushed her hair out of her face and shrugged. So we talked. We're good now. Penny let go of her hand and crossed her arms. The way he stared at you when he left was more than just as a friend. Would you want a second chance? Sandy nodded. Yes, but this time it wouldn't be a secret, and no one gets to stand in the way. The phone rang. Penny stood up as Sandy put the makeup away on the vanity. Ooh, I bet that's Wyatt now. Sandy flinched. Then she put the small container of blush down and walked over to Penny. I'll take it. Of course you want to hear his voice, Penny said as she handed her the phone. Stop. Sandy's face felt hot as she took the receiver and said, Hey. Wyatt said, I believe him. Jay was shocked. Wyatt believed him, Sandy reported to her friend. Thank goodness, Penny said. They're in the chapel. Jay wants to see you. Sandy glanced at the floor and took a breath. Now she needed to go ensure the ceremony had no interruptions. Sounds good. We're heading over now. Guard him and tell your parents the wedding will start soon. Wyatt lowered his voice. Already done, but tell Penny that Geneva and her new husband are seated. Your mother is already there, Sandy told Penny, and waited for her directions. Penny shrugged. I'll be with Jay. She'll be on her best behavior. Sandy wished she'd had her friends when she was miserable. It had been her own fault for keeping a secret and not trusting others could help. Now she knew her friends were more her family than her own father had been. Well, she won't try to stop the wedding. Wait for me, Wyatt. Then she said to Penny, Jay's in the chapel. Are you ready to get married? Penny took her hand and tugged her toward the door. Yes. Good. Penny and Jay had a chance to talk about Eva, clear the air, and get ready for the ceremony. Wyatt and Sandy would talk to the captain and ensure a smooth ceremony. Once duties were done, then she could talk to Wyatt again and find out what he wanted for the future. It couldn't all be one-sided. Chapter 8. Wyatt. Sandy held her breath as he came up the steps and joined her. As she looked at his muscles everywhere, and a longing for a kiss hit her hard. The boy she knew was no more. He was all hard muscles now, but underneath that gorgeous physique, the heart of the boy she remembered still beat. She glanced at her feet as she felt her face heat. Wyatt reached out and touched the small of her back. Let's go talk to the captain. At the reception, will you dance with me? Yes, she answered, but she didn't move. Wyatt's gaze met hers and his lips parted. She closed her eyes and stood on her toes. Then, for the briefest moment, the rest of the world disappeared. Wyatt wrapped his hands around her waist, and his lips met hers. The rhythm of the ship brought them closer together for a second, but then jarred her into the present. As he took his hands off her hips, she adjusted her dress. Once they were both good, Wyatt opened the door and led her inside. They used the wedding as an excuse to quickly speak to the captain, and they were led to his chambers. Once there, the captain was adjusting the buttons on his white jacket. Wyatt held out his hand to shake. Captain, who are you two? The captain asked. Wyatt stood taller, put his hands behind his back like he was still in the Marines, and said, You are about to marry my sister and her husband in a few minutes. The captain did up his top button. Yes, I'll be down in 10 minutes when it starts." Sandy pressed her hand on Wyatt's forearm and stepped forward. "You were speaking with the mother of the groom earlier. She will do anything to stop this wedding, but she doesn't realize that Penny and Jay are already married. If she ruins the ceremony, she only embarrasses herself." "Did she ask you to be a part of anything?" The captain turned toward her and pressed his lips together. She assumed he had something to say. No one said anything until the captain crossed his arms and said, "Yeah." She said, "If someone comes and says, if anyone has just cause why the two should not be wed, let them speak now or forever hold your peace, then I am to let them speak." Wyatt said, "We have reason to believe that she hired an actress to claim that she is pregnant." The captain's eyes widened. "What should I do then? No one ever speaks at that moment. Eva was Sandy's friend. There had to be a way to stop her." She placed her hand on Wyatt's abdomen to get him to turn toward her. "We'll handle the actress as much as possible, and the bride and groom are well aware of this plan. Please ensure the wedding ceremony is beautiful." "Absolutely. I will do my part." "Thank you so much for all your help." Sandy then moved her hand on Wyatt to his arm and directed them both to leave. "As the wedding planner, I will make sure things go smoothly as much as I can." Without a word, Wyatt followed her cues and they left. Once the door to the captain's room closed behind them, she swallowed, stared into his warm, sexy eyes and wished they were far away. Then the tension in her spine increased. "We have to warn Jay and Penny and find Eva. Let's tell them before the ceremony," Wyatt said. He then took her hand in his as they walked down the small flight of stairs from the control room and headed toward the chapel. The warmth of the day still clung in the night air as they made their way across the deck. Wyatt's nearness made her ache in places she long thought dormant. No other boyfriend had ever made her feel like this. Once they made it to the chapel, he held open the door for her. As she filed past the guests, she saw the side door to the bridal suite was open again. They must have returned there. Sandy and Wyatt turned in there and saw the couple as ship attendants ensured they looked good. Both the bride and the groom stopped and stared at them. Michael watched the door. He let them pass without a word. As they entered the room, Sandy glanced at Wyatt for a second and then said, "Jay, Penny, Kate paid Eva to say publicly she's having your child." Jay took a deep breath as he took that in. He went to Penny, kissed her shoulder and said, "Please make Eva a counteroffer to simply say congratulations. Tell her I'll double whatever my mother paid her. I'll foot the bill, whatever it is. I want my wife to have the perfect wedding, surrounded by friends." Sandy glanced at her brother, who had once had a short fling with Eva. He didn't say a word. "Good, okay. We have a plan then. Michael, watch the back door." She turned to Wyatt and felt her own stirring. She wished he wanted her half as much as Jay clearly wanted Penny. She kept that thought to herself. "You go to the front door. I'll ensure the wedding goes off without a hitch on the inside." They walked to the door to leave, but Penny called behind them, "Wait, Wyatt's supposed to walk me down the aisle." "Of course." Sandy turned and nodded. "He'll do his part, but if you don't mind, we'll have him and me walk off the aisle and go to the back. Michael will guard the back door, as we said. We'll be discreet and all eyes will be on you." "Sounds great. Thanks, Sandy." Penny had her hand on her heart and a smile on her lips. If only this was done. Doubling the price that Kate offered would be an obscene amount of money, but first Sandy had to offer it. "Don't thank me yet. We have to find Eva." Penny looped her arm through her brother's. "You will. Now let's go take our places." Jay and Michael both slipped out the door. A second later, the music started, indicating the men were taking their places. Penny held her brother close. "Do you think Eva wants to ruin our wedding?" Wyatt stared at her. Sandy answered, "I think Eva's desperate for money, and the price must have been pretty good for her to agree." Penny shook her head. "I don't understand though. Just recently, Jay gave her play $2 million. Unlike Michael or Sandy, Jay went against his parents in business and made way more money than any of them, without doing one illegal thing. Sandy's father cut corners with his inheritance when he made deals with the late Mitch Morgan. Unlike her, Penny wasn't born into more money than she could ever use. She took Penny's hand and said, which went to her play and the production, and Jay earned the money back in a charity donation. Eva didn't get that money for herself. Penny lifted her shoulders. Well, I hope you find her. I don't want my wedding ruined. We're on it, Wyatt said as the music started for the procession. At the door, Sandy took her brother's arm and floated down the aisle. Her cousin seemed so excited, and his eyes grew larger, even though he'd already seen Penny minutes ago. Sandy held her flower bouquet close to her chest as her gaze landed on Wyatt. He smiled at her, and her heart felt like it floated in her chest. Once Penny took Jay's hand, Wyatt kissed his sister's cheek and gave her away. Then she motioned for Michael. As Wyatt stepped away from the bride, they also walked off the altar. A few seconds later, Sandy stood at the back door. Wyatt joined her and took her hand. This is going smoothly. The I do's finished, and the captain glanced back at the pair of them. She held her breath as Wyatt said, "Here it comes." The captain said, "If anyone can show just cause why this couple cannot lawfully be joined together in matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace." The door flung open and Eva walked in. "I do," Wyatt said in his military tone. "Stop." Sandy leaned over and asked her friend in her ear, "How much did Kate pay you?" $1 million, Eva whispered so no one else heard. Sandy then said, louder than she meant to, "That's a lot." Her face flushed as she realized people stared at them. Eva whispered, "I kept saying no, but that money will buy me a new life." Sandy took her hand and then said in Eva's ear as quietly as possible, "Jay will double it if you don't ruin his wedding." A huge sigh of relief escaped Eva. "Sorry, I thought the ceremony was over already. Please, go on." The captain nodded as Eva slipped out the door again. Wyatt retook Sandy's hand. The captain said, "Now by the power vested in me, it is my honor and delight to declare you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Jay cupped Penny's chin and then wrapped his arms around her for the kiss. Sandy turned and stared at Wyatt. "We did it." He held her hand close to his heart. "Good, because I want to be alone with you again. There is something I want to say to you, Sandy. Lead the way." There was no time to waste. She'd already lost years, and this time, she'd ensure no one interrupted her happy ever after. Chapter 9. All the guests filed into the reception. Sandy checked all the tables to ensure everything was in order and all was going smoothly. Then she checked where they'd set up a photo booth and cleared the aisle. As she was down on her knees to get the film, she saw black shoes under the table. She sat up and gazed at the man who made her heart soar. He held out his hand to help her stand. "Wyatt." People were starting to dance. She watched them. "Can we go back to your room?" He had never been that forward about sex before. She bit her lip as she tried to decide if she would or wouldn't. Part of her wanted to say yes. Another part wanted to dance first. She swallowed and asked, "Why? We can go anywhere." His face had a tint of a blush, so he saw the implication too. She relaxed her arms and legs as he said, "I want to talk where we won't get interrupted." Talk, yes. They had to do that. She reached out and took his arm. "Quiet is good, and my room is best. Let's go." Neither one of them said anything as they slipped outside and walked to the elevator. No one had seen them leave, and the halls were light on traffic. As they made it to her room, she fished out her key and opened it. She went in first, and he followed. She went to the seat near the balcony and stared at him. Whatever was going on, he was serious. She patted the cushioned chair next to her and said, "Wyatt, we're here, so let's talk." He came toward her but didn't sit in the chair. He pushed the small table out of the way and knelt down as he took her hand. "Sandy, you have always been the one in my heart. When I married Jessica at the courthouse, I tried to be a good husband, but the truth is I was and am still in love with you. I wish I had been different, and I don't have any right." Her heart hammered. She reached out and brushed her hand on his cheek, which was unusually smooth, as he'd shaved for the wedding. "Stop," He pressed his lips together and blushed again. I said too much? She held his shoulder so he didn't get up as she asked, You love me still? He took her hand off him, held both of them, and then squeezed. Yes, then she finally knew what her heart was missing. Wyatt was the man she'd wanted and dreamed about all her life, and nothing stood in their way now. She took his hands near her heart as a huge smile grew on her face. That's good because, Wyatt, I've been in love with you my whole life, and I don't want to go another minute. If you need to get married as soon as you can, then I agree. His face darkened as he took his hand away. I don't want to marry you. You don't? Her lips parted and she couldn't close them. He pressed his hand on her chin. A tremble washed through her before she met his warm gaze. Let me finish my sentence. I don't want to marry you for any other reason than love, and I don't have a ring yet. Oh. A ring was holding him back. Seriously? Her eyes watered as her pulse raced. Yet? So you want to ask me? Waking up every day with the girl who makes my heart stir. Yes, he swallowed. Could you handle being a stepmother? Laughing might not be good at the moment, but she felt the bubbles of a giggle inside her. She held it in. She doesn't have any other mother beside me, so we'll drop the step. He stood up. Let me get a ring, give me an hour, and then we'll dance at Penny and Jay's reception. She jumped out of her seat and placed her hand on his shoulder. She wanted to go and be with him. You're buying on the ship? He nodded. That's the fastest way I know. I don't want to go to the reception by myself. She offered her arm. We could go together and I could mention which one I want. Then we can return and tell everyone together. He kissed both her cheeks. She ran her hand through his hair. He then lowered his lips to hers and her body stirred. Together they were right. Her heart knew it. He ended the kiss and glanced at the door as he adjusted his pants. Let's go then. Now? She asked, though she knew if they kissed like that again, it would be game over for the night. Part of her wanted nothing more than to lie in his arms, right here, right now. His hand went to her spine to lead her out as he said in a deeper, sexier tone, When I take your clothes off, I want to enjoy the evening and not have to return to the party. Agreed. His daughter was at the reception, with her grandparents. Charlotte would have to know. Sandy adjusted her dress to ensure it was straight. Fair enough, lead the way. At the elevator, they went to the main floor. Then they ducked into the diamond store. Wyatt quickly explained their engagement, and the saleslady brought out 5 rings. Sandy pressed her lips together as she perused the options. Wyatt said, Which one do you want? Every one of them would cut through metal if she tried. She pointed to one inside the glass that caught her eye and waved the huge diamonds off. None of these. Can I see that one? The sales clerk began her pitch. This diamond has a modern cut, so you can see the clarity. Sandy refused to wait for the entire sales line. I like that it's simple. I don't want a rock on my finger where I could take out a child's eye if I wear it around the house. The saleslady asked, Do you want to see anything else? No, I like this one. Sandy handed the ring to Wyatt. The saleslady rang it up. Wyatt must have seen the price tag, as he said, Are you sure? There are other, more expensive. It's not about the price. It's about what I said. Let's go. I want to tell everyone. She slipped the ring on her finger and pointed to the door. He signed his name on the receipt, and they were done. Then they walked toward the reception. At the door, he opened it and took her hand. A warmness enveloped her as she asked, No more secrets? Absolutely not. He kissed her hand and then said, as the bride and groom finished their dance, If we told more people, or even just Penny, she might have been the voice of reason for one or both of us. She winked at him. They were together now. This was all she wanted. A lightness entered her step as she said, Let's not think about the past. We have the rest of our lives. He directed them toward the table. I can't wait to tell Charlotte. His daughter. Soon she'd be a mom, and with Wyatt, she'd help raise Charlotte as her very own. If she sold her business and worked for Victoria, she'd have enough money to ensure her new daughter had a proper trust fund too. Chapter 10. Wyatt wanted 1 minute alone to prepare his daughter. Sandy walked away and saw her brother standing at a window overlooking the dark ocean. She tapped his arm. She'd tell him her news, but the second she saw his face, she swallowed and asked, "Michael, what's going on? Are you planning on going to Calliope and Chris Summers' wedding tomorrow?" He asked with his arms crossed. Tomorrow, when the ship ported in Cozumel, she'd planned on going to the resort where Calliope Evers, a girl on her high school cheerleading team, was to get married. She nodded, though he did not seem happy. "Yes, when we port. It all worked out wonderfully. Where we have all these weddings?" The last was said as a question. Seriously, her brother seemed like he wanted to tear through the wall of the ship and swim to shore. She crossed her arms and waited for the reason. Michael said, "Chris is having an affair, or Calliope." She had been nice, though Sandy hadn't interacted much with her over the years. "What? How do you know?" "I ran into Chris and Roxanne. Roxanne is a teacher. She had no idea about Calliope. Michael must have seen them more often." Wow, awkward. Jay's mother had been friends with the Summers family, so they'd seen them every so often as children. Though Sandy wasn't close to any of them personally, she gently pushed her brother's arm with her own. They were the only two left in their branch of the Marshall family. They had to stick together. "Chris told you?" Michael's hands were fists as he spoke through pressed lips. "He told me not to say anything. Tomorrow's wedding will be a disaster." Her brother had ended a relationship with Eva a few months ago. Not that it had been a healthy relationship. Calliope was always the sweetheart, willing to volunteer and do good deeds, the church-going type. So Sandy's brother should not look like he wanted to punch anyone. Was he interested in someone like her? Calliope was always nice. He dropped his hands and put up his poker face. "She deserves better than Chris Summers. But none of this is why you are glowing with happiness." For now, she'd let that go. Michael was an adult, but an interest in a good girl would be good for him. She shrugged. Now was not the time. Wyatt came behind her and placed his hand on her spine. She held up her hand and said, "Michael, Wyatt asked me to marry him." A huge smile grew on his face, but then he spoke in a serious tone. "Congrats, Wyatt. You might be a Marine and the son of a general, but I will find a way to kill you if you hurt Sandy." "I believe you." Wyatt nodded. "And I would never. I love her." He loved her. The words sang in her heart. It was good her brother acted like her father, though unlike their actual father, Michael had a good heart and head. He pointed. "Good, now go. That little girl is waving to you both." "Charlotte," Wyatt said as they both turned. Sandy waved goodbye to her brother, who then went to speak to Jay as Penny danced with her father. As they approached, Charlotte left her dog with her grandmother and ran into her father's arms. "Daddy, this wedding is great." "It is," he said, and took Sandy's hand in his. Charlotte smiled and stepped out of her father's hug as she said, "Sandy, have you thought about marrying my dad at all? I promise I'd be on my best behavior." Sandy was about to answer when Wyatt squeezed her hand and dropped down on one knee. "What does this best behavior include, Charlotte?" Charlotte turned and stared at her father as she drew an X on her heart with her finger. "I won't scream or throw a temper tantrum most of the time." "Most? What about never again?" Wyatt tilted his head and stared at her. She sucked in a breath and then turned toward Sandy. "Daddy, don't make me sound horrible. We want Sandy to marry you so we can stay together forever." Sandy knelt down in her high heels and fancy dress. "Your dad is just teasing you, sweetie. He asked me and bought me this ring when I said yes." Charlotte wrapped her hands around her neck and shouted. Wyatt shushed her. So Charlotte then tried to whisper, but it sounded like a shout. So you're my new mom? Sandy took both hands in hers and nodded. This was a good beginning. I will be, but I'll need you to be in the wedding ceremony. Can you handle that? Flower girls are for little girls. Charlotte held her head higher. Can I be a bridesmaid, like you were today? For a 5-year-old, she acted like a teenager. Sandy nodded. Why not? Sure. Sandy, can I talk to you a minute? Wyatt said as he stood. He motioned for his father, who just returned to the table to sit with Charlotte. His daughter took her dog back without a word. Yes, she said as she followed him to the edge of the dance floor, where no one else lingered. He took both her hands and held them to his head. I said I'd ask you later. I'm asking you now. Will you marry me? Yes, Wyatt. She hugged his neck and smelled a home she'd never had. With Wyatt, her life was perfect. She kissed his chin as she let go. Did I just hear a proposal? The bride's voice echoed behind her. Sandy turned around and showed the ring. Penny, yes, you did. Penny hugged her, hard. I'm so happy for you both. Me too, Jay added as he shook Wyatt's hand. Wyatt then loudly said, We're happy, together and in love. No more secrets. No more wallowing in the past. This was a new beginning. Their old friendships were renewed, and now Sandy had the love of her life. Everything was amazing. See how perfect your brother is? I see how much he cares. Penny laughed. Wyatt wrapped his hands around Sandy's waist and leaned in for one more kiss. She closed her eyes and realized this was the moment. She had her happy ever after. Thank you for reading. I hope you loved Sandra and Wyatt's romance. The next story is Bad Boy Romance with Michael Marshall when he rescues runaway bride Calliope Campbell in Favorite Sin. Or head over to my new series starting with Rocking Player to follow 6 sisters as they fall in love. And to find out about new books, sign up for my newsletter, https://victoriapinder.com. Also by Victoria Pinder. The Marshall Family Saga. Favorite Crush, Favorite Mistake, Favorite Sin, Favorite Scandal, The Steel Series, Rocking Player, Ruthless Financier, Wicked Cowboy, Powerful Prince, Cocky MD Scottish Seducer, Legendary Rock Star, Charming Boyfriend, Fierce Fighter, Treasured Guardian, French Doctor, The House of Morgan, Secret Crush, Secret Bet, Secret Wish, Secret Dad, Secret Hair, Secret Tryst, Secret Date, Secret Romeo, Secret Caress, Secret Bridesmaid, Secret Admirer, Secret Cowboy, Secret Mistress, Secret Cinderella, Secret Lover, Secret Tycoon, Secret Enemy. Visit victoriapinder.com for the complete list of books. About the author. USA Today best-selling author, Victoria Pinder grew up in Irish Catholic Boston, then moved to Miami. Eventually, she found that writing is her passion. She always wrote stories to entertain herself. Her parents are practical-minded people demanding a job, but when she sat down to write, she knew this was exactly what she was meant to do. Today, she continues to write romance novels that readers love.